Good morning, everyone. I'd firstly like to thank the organising committee for the opportunity to speak to you today. So I'm going to be presenting two innovations which I've introduced in lift and escalator maintenance at London Underground. And I'll be talking about the technologies or the technology trends which have enabled me to do this, and how these are changing the way that innovation is taking place. So the structure of the talk, I'll start with some background in terms of research that's been done into the sources of innovation. I'll then talk about the trends which I've found have enabled me to do this, and then introduce and present the two examples. And I'll then make a few recommendations for implementing an innovation strategy. So when I was looking into the background information to write the paper, I came across this book by a professor at MIT called Eric von Hippel, and he's done a large amount of research into the different sources of innovation, and he identifies two main sources defined by their relationship to the innovation process. So manufacturers benefit from selling the product, and users benefit from using the product. And what he's identified is that there's a change from the traditional manufacturer-led innovation process to a more user-centric process, which is benefiting users in the way that they can get an exact solution to their problem, whereas manufacturers tend to generalize solutions to maximize profits from appealing to a large number of customers. So linked to this, where manufacturers have to do a large amount of research and development, and that's quite a large proportion of the budget for the design process. Users already know what the problems are. They don't have to do research and development, and they want to just get something that works. And this is becoming more and more possible by the technology that's enabling us to collaborate, so we can work with people wherever they are, and we can find out the knowledge that we need to be able to come up with these solutions without necessarily having to rely on the manufacturers. But this can be a hybrid approach. So manufacturers may take a product that's been through a user-led innovation process, and it's been put into the public domain or sold to them, and they're saving themselves from having to do the research and development, and they can then commercialize that product. So there's different ways that this can be combined. So I'll now talk about some of the technology trends. So the main high-level trend, which is influencing the technology changes that we're seeing, which many of us are aware of, is Moore's law, whereby the processing speed of computers is doubling every 2 years. And this was predicted back in 1975 by Gordon Moore, co-founder of Intel, and this is still applying today. So this exponential trend is massively improving the speed, reducing the size, and reducing the cost of technology. And this is an example from Apple. Their top product in 2000 had the specifications on the left there, and their iPhone, the first iPhone, has a specification on the right. So for half the price, you've got a comparable performance, double the processing speed, and a lot smaller size. And this is enabling us to access smaller and smaller processing. So embedded computing is becoming more popular. You've seen lots of people wearing smartwatches now. Not only do we consume this technology, but for the cost of £25, you can buy a credit card-sized computer which is comparable to the first iPhone and has Wi-Fi and the ability to plug in sensors. So for prototyping and design, this gives us lots of possibilities. In condition monitoring, where I'm based, or where I'm focusing my work on at the moment, we can build prototypes of wireless monitoring systems and things like that. So this is giving us lots of potential for innovation. Connectivity is bringing us all closer together, as you can see from the photo. But whether or not you agree that we're becoming more sociable, we are now able to collaborate and contact people all over the world and work closely with them. And from the point of view of someone developing some software or a mobile solution, whereas previously you would have had to purchase the hardware and build the software for that particular piece of hardware, you can now either make use of the mobile devices that people already have in their pockets, or you can buy a fleet of smartphones or tablets for a fraction of the price of what you would have had to do before. So this is democratizing the process. If you are to build an application, you don't need to install it on every device. You can rent the use of a server in a data center, pay for it on a pay-per-use basis, and you can build software that you only have to deploy by sending someone an internet link. The way that software is being used as well is being revolutionized by the cloud, so you can, rather than having to purchase a full license for advanced technical software, you can pay by the month or pay annually, and you've got a much lower investment requirement. So the case studies which I will talk about are both to do with the management and access to data. So I'm involved specifically with condition monitoring, as I mentioned. So data is one of the key things which we need to focus on to be able to get value from this process and be able to improve things based on information. So there were a couple of problems which I encountered, and with the user-led innovation process, users, as I mentioned, they know what their specific problems are. So in this case, the first one was a fairly straightforward issue, whereby the staff who were attending either a fault or were carrying out a service didn't have direct access to the breakdown of component data for escalators on the underground. They had to contact someone who was in the office that could go onto the computer, and it wasn't a very streamlined process. As well as this, the database was managed by a team of people who didn't have direct contact with the people that were on site. So if the person on site discovers that there's some information that's wrong or missing, there was no process in place for them to then get that information updated. So these were the two problems for the first example that I aimed to solve. So I came across some software called Filemaker Pro. This is a screenshot of the software. And what this allows you to do is to build a customized application that runs on tablets or phones. And having not had a background in IT or writing code, I thought this was great because it's a drag and drop piece of software. But then you can customize it and you can include scripts in it where you can, for example, create an email that gets sent to a particular email address. So the end result looks a bit like this. And you've got categories based on the way that we like to organize our data. And I've involved the other users in the process so that this is completely designed in the way that we want to use it. Works on the iPhone and the iPad, as I mentioned, and it allows you to have that feedback loop of getting the data back. So this is a fairly simple solution, but what potentially could have taken a long time to have a developer external to the company produce this for us, and probably a lot of money, this has hardly cost anything at all. Second one, so I decided to take things a bit further, and with our condition monitoring process, we have various systems that we use to collect the data. And this is unavoidable because a lot of these systems are very specialist in particular areas. So we use those systems for their analysis functionality and things like that. So I didn't want to reduce the number of systems we had, but I wanted to make all of the data or the key pieces of information available in one place. And this would save a large amount of time and brain power as well, because you've got to think about logging into lots of systems when you're trying to analyze a fault. So that was the first thing I wanted to address. The second one was if you want to see what the overall condition is and any known problems about a machine, it's quite difficult at the moment, or it was. So I wanted to create something that was a central source of information. And I also wanted it to be scalable, so we'll be starting to monitor or take responsibility for more escalators across the underground, so I wanted to be able to build something that could be scalable and in terms of the number of assets and the number of users. And on top of that, the data sources as well, I wanted to be able to modularize it so I could add more data sources. So I got a bit stuck into the detail here, and I started to look at more low-level solutions in terms of what I could build from scratch. And I found that there was lots of open source technologies available. So none of the technologies that I used to build this actually cost anything. So this is all the languages of the web. So you've got HTML for the structure of the content, CSS for the way that it's displayed and the formatting, and then JavaScript for how to make it a dynamic. So you can effectively build an application which runs in a web browser. So I then started to look further into this, and JavaScript has got a huge community of developers who are building tools and libraries upon the JavaScript language and making these available open source. So AngularJS was the framework that I chose to use, and this is one of many different ones that you can come across. But it allows you to build something that resembles and acts like an application without having to install anything on a device. It's just purely running on the cloud or on a server. D3 is another library. This is specifically for visualizations. So you can actually control the CSS content or what's being displayed within your browser directly from the data. So you don't need to have any plugins or any proprietary software. You just purely control what's being shown in the browser from the data, and that's a direct link. So anytime something changes in either direction, it updates. So it can be an interactive, completely interactive experience. And then another tool that I used was Bootstrap, which is a useful thing for building, without having much background in development. You can use this as a library for creating things like buttons and tables and drop-down menus and things like that. And it saves you from having to code everything to the complete detail. You use these, effectively these templates, and you can later swap those out for customized ones if you want to, but this gets you kind of going a bit more quickly. And this is the result. So there's a front page which allows you to get an overview of all of your assets. You can switch between lifts and escalators and then different areas of the network. So I've future-proofed it effectively because the area I work in is Jubilee Northern Piccadilly line, but I've created buttons to allow you to view the other parts of the network as well. You can then look at the asset list, and as this is all built from scratch, you can add columns for, say, condition monitoring, alarms, and things like that at a later date. And then you have a dashboard page. Again, this can all be customized, but this gives you access to all of the different data sources that you need. So you've got your overall information, the asset data, which is everything that was in the case study 1 solution, but it's available in here as well. And then a list of your faults, and this comes from our CMMS system, so everything that's happened to that asset is on here as well. And then this is data linked to the information that we get from the oil analysis laboratory. So we send, every 6 months, we send a sample of our gearbox oil to a laboratory, and they provide this data. We're now having this in a format where we can navigate through this alongside all of our other information. And then this is the latest addition to it, which is this is a live link, although this is a screenshot of it, to our online monitoring systems. So this is taking data from remote systems, measuring vibration and temperature, and we can trend that and incorporate alarms into it as well. So this is available through the software that's been provided for that system. However, looking at it in here, it's still interactive, but you can then suddenly go to, say, your oil and do a comparison between the two, whereas previously we weren't able to do that quickly. So there are two examples of things where I've managed to find technology to do things very, very cheaply, and I would say easily, but without having to use an external company. That information, where I haven't known what to do, has been available through collaborating and finding out through other people using the internet and things how this can be done. So to make a few recommendations of where I would suggest focus should be if a firm is considering moving towards a more user-led innovation, is to manage security risks. So anytime something is connected to the internet or put onto a public server, as we know that you're creating potential for security risks. So those risks should be minimized appropriately. And it's not possible to completely eliminate it. So there needs to be some kind of justification for how much is done in the way of minimizing those risks, for example, encrypting and backing up data. So an essential thing to enable innovation to be facilitated is to have the support there. For example, with IT-related tools, to have that support to make sure that it's acceptable in terms of security. There's recommended tools. So I kind of figured a lot of this stuff out, but it would be good if there were kind of recommended tools that you could use if you wanted to do a certain thing. And then leadership as well, to actually inspire people to think, what can I do to improve things? Collaboration is a key requirement to make the best of your knowledge within a business. So rather than having separate teams, which is quite common, a lot of companies are now looking at collaborating and sharing data between teams to maximise the effectiveness of their innovation process. So to conclude, the main points I'd like to make is that the technology is becoming more democratized, and as computer processing speed increases and we have access to more and more of these tools, this is going to increase further. And user-centric innovation, whether it's an individual person or a firm who want to develop something for themselves, there are lots of benefits to doing this, whether it's the fact that you're saving the money and time, or that you can develop something specific to customize to meet your needs. And finally, leadership and support can optimize innovation. So this will enable it to enable your business or enable you to get the most out of it. Thanks very much for listening.